here in Armenia, there are two camps of people in terms of their thoughts about this supposed peace deal. This peace summit that was put on by President Trump with the presidents of Azerbaijan and the prime minister of Armenia was designed to bring peace in this region, but they did not sign a peace deal. They signed three things. Azerbaijan and Armenia signed an understanding that they are both going to pull out of the OSCE. The OSCE was a organization that was started to try to keep the peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia back in the 1990s. And they've been doing a very poor job at that. And so it was in everybody's interest to just get rid of it, just scrap that whole thing. It's obsolete, it's out of date, and let's start over with something new. That was the first thing they signed. That's not a peace deal. That's actually getting rid of the last peace deal. The second thing they signed was between the United States and Armenia, and that was a deal that would allow the United States and Armenia to jointly develop a road between Azerbaijan and their exclave of Nakhichevan. It's about 29 miles across Armenia to get from Azeri Nakhichevan to Azerbaijan proper. And they never had a good way to get across there. And it was more than just about we want to go visit relatives or we want to send products over there. It was more about Nakhichevan actually touches Turkey. And so Azerbaijan is landlocked by Armenia and has a real hard time getting its oil and other petroleum products out to market. They have one pipeline that goes across Georgia, but they can't go through Russia. And they got the Caspian Sea or whatever that is on the eastern side of Azerbaijan. So they can't go that way. And they can't go through Iran very easily. And Armenia wouldn't let them through either. So they really want to be able to get their oil and gas out to Western markets. Western markets tremendously need and want that oil and gas now because they're no longer buying that stuff from Russia. So that being the case, the Western world has been like, yeah, we're all on board with the peace deal that allows Azerbaijan to get more oil out to us. And okay, that makes sense. Now, this is Vanadzor where I am in Armenia. We'll zoom out here. We got Armenia in the middle, Azerbaijan over here on the east, Georgia to the north, Turkey to the west, and Armenia right here. Now, if you zoom in on Armenia, you see this southern part of Armenia here. This is called the Sunik province, and it drops all the way down to the Iranian border. This is Iran down here. This is the place that they're talking about needing a road. This is Azerbaijan, and they can't get between each other. So Azerbaijan has been pushing for this for a long time. And Armenia has been like, heck no, you guys suck. We're not giving you access through our land, our sovereign territory. And Azerbaijan bided its time and grew its military forces until it had a much larger military than Armenia. And then they attacked. And they drove all the Armenians out of the Nagorno Karabakh district, which is over here, just to the east of the Armenian border. But it was like Nakhichevan. It was an exclave full of Armenians that didn't have an easy way to get back and forth to Armenia. They wanted to become part of Armenia proper, and Azerbaijan wasn't having that. So Azerbaijan kicked all 120,000 people that were left there out in September 2023, sent them packing into Armenia. Now they're living as internally displaced people inside Armenia. And Azerbaijan said that land is going to be ours now forever. And they say that is historic Azeri land. The problem is the Azeris' history only goes back to 1917. And if you visit that land that they're talking about, it is totally covered with Armenian writing. There's Armenian writing, ancient writing, chiseled into every stone building, church, school, cemetery, you name it. And this is not going back hundreds of years, it's going back thousands of years. So it's obvious that the Armenians have lived in that land for millennia. The Azeris have not, but that doesn't matter to the Azeris. They took it over by force and they started to bulldoze the churches, bulldoze the monasteries, bulldoze the cemeteries. Anything that had Armenian writing on it, they're getting rid of to try to erase that history and try to rewrite it and say that Azerbaijan was, the ones who lived there, but they didn't. Now, There is already a road down here. Actually, you can see the road right there. The deal that President Trump made was to expand that road because it's only 2 lanes and open it up and allow trucks from Azerbaijan to drive the 29 miles across Armenia and to put a pipeline across and a railroad across as well. And the Azeris call that the Zangezur corridor. Now, the Armenians don't like to call it a corridor. Not really sure why, but whatever you call it, it's going to be an open highway of commerce across the southern border of Armenia. Now, some Armenians look at that and say, I think we're going to make some money on that deal. With all that trade, all that commerce coming through our southern border, we got to get some money out of that somehow. That's got to be good for our countries, and maybe we can even normalize relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey and open our borders there. The third thing that Armenia and Azerbaijan signed was a memorandum to agree to sit down and talk about a framework for a potential future peace deal. So it's not a peace deal, it's just an entry to talk about a peace deal. And they're going to have a hard time coming to an agreement on an actual peace deal because Azerbaijan is asking for some pretty serious stuff, like saying we're not going to have a peace deal until Armenia changes its constitution. Can you imagine somebody coming to America and saying, we'll do a deal with you, but you have to get rid of the First Amendment? Yeah, it's just, no, not going to happen. So there are a lot of Armenians who believe that their president just sold them out. And there are a lot of Armenians here in Armenia who say, maybe this actually could work. And so let's give them the benefit of the doubt. It makes sense that there are people who are going to be upset and people who aren't, because just like the United States, Armenia has left-wing people and right-wing people. Now, Armenians that live in California tend to be more leaning to the left because they live in California. People that live here in Armenia tend to be a little more conservative on balance. I'm sure that my Armenian friends might beg to differ, and that's okay. But it seems to me, from talking to Armenians here in Armenia, in this town of Vanadzor behind me, they're cautiously optimistic. And it is a little bittersweet for them because they realize that there was nothing in any of these memorandums that they signed that said anything about the 150,000 Artsakis being able to go back to their land that they were pushed out of by Azerbaijan in 2023. There's nothing about the release of the 80 or so hostages that Azerbaijan is still holding from that war from 2023. And the world body saying nothing about those hostages. And it is bittersweet in that it feels like it's rewarding a dictator, Aliyev, for being a dictator, for aggressing against his neighbors. So I'm going to play for you, first of all, President Trump explaining the route and what it's called, which I think is funny, and then we'll come back and talk about that. So listen.
Very importantly, we have also resolved the key issue that foiled previous negotiations. This declaration establishes what they are calling a great honor for me. I didn't ask for this. The Trump route for international peace and prosperity, which is a special transit area that will allow Azerbaijan to get full access to its territory of Nakhchivan while fully respecting Armenia's sovereignty.
So there are a lot of people who are looking at this and saying, Azerbaijan gets everything they want out of this. What does Armenia get out of this? Like, I can give you the answer to that. What Armenia gets out of this is they don't get invaded, at least not in the short term. Right now, they don't get invaded. So they've been able to hopefully hold off an invasion by Azerbaijan to some later date, at the very least. That's what Armenia gets out of this. And that feels like a bitter pill to swallow, because it is, in a manner of speaking, it's a loss for Armenia. Armenia would love to have the military might to be able to stand up to Azerbaijan, push them back out of the Nagorno Karabakh district, and allow the Armenians who have lived there for millennia to move back to their homes. But the reality on the ground is that Armenia's military is much smaller and weaker than Azerbaijan's military. Now that's changing and changing fast, but they're still weaker. And so they would likely lose any war that started between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And they're going to have to get used to the fact that the Azeris are going to be driving trucks across Armenian land back and forth into Nakhchivan. Now, again, hopefully that leads to more openness, and that openness will lead to increased prosperity for everybody, but those things are just hopes right now. And there are a lot of Armenians that are still very bitter about losing. Azerbaijan killed 5,000 Armenian men in 44 days of war back in 2020. That's how I found out about Armenia, was from that war. So President Trump is trying to put a win in his box. He's trying to get a win on the board. Somewhere, anywhere, I want to bring some peace. In the case of Armenia, at least, they desperately need a big brother that will take care of them in this region, because Russia is not doing that anymore. So since Russia is not doing that anymore, Armenia feels like it really doesn't have much choice. Now, what's in it for America? America is going to invest a lot of money into building this corridor. Now, that tells me they've got to have a plan for making that money back. I don't know what that plan is. That hasn't been enumerated yet, but somehow, some way, the United States is hoping to make a profit from this at some point. Right now, it's going to be a lot of sunk cost on the part of the U.S. taxpayer. Millions of those taxpayers are actually Armenian, and so we'll just say that we're going to take the Armenians' American taxes and use that to pay for the road down in Sunik province. That'd be my guess. That's what I would do. It also pokes Russia in the eye, because Russia has pulled out of this region. Armenia has pulled out of Russia's strategic military alliance. Their answer to NATO is called the CSTO. And Armenia pulled out of the CSTO because they weren't getting anything out of it. And so now they're leaning more toward the United States. There are American troops here in Armenia every week. Did you know that? Did you know we've got, I don't know, about 80 U.S. troops in Armenia? And that what they're doing is training the Armenian military on American military strategy and tactics. Because the war in Ukraine has shown everybody that Western military tactics and strategy trumps Russian military tactics and strategy every time. So everybody is wanting to get more American weapons and know-how for their militaries, and that includes Armenia. Now, let me play for you the second part of this, another quote here, where President Trump says, these two nations have agreed to stop fighting forever and ever.
The country of Armenia and Azerbaijan are committing to stop all fighting forever, open up commerce, travel, and diplomatic relations, and respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. So importantly. And I just spent a lot of time with these two men. I think they're going to have a great relationship. You want to know the truth?
Gag.
They didn't see each other that much, but they probably will. I think you two are going to have a great relationship.
No.
No doubt. And if you don't, call me and I'll straighten it out. Okay.
Yeah. So President Trump is like, well, these two countries are going to stop fighting forever. And now they're friends. They used to be enemies until they walked into my office. And now they walked out of my office and they're friends. You can tell by the body language looking at both of them. Those guys are not friends. And you shouldn't be friends with somebody like Ilham Aliyev. Now, President Trump went on to praise Aliyev and say, these are great men. They're great leaders. They're good people. I've gotten to know them. And Aliyev is a good guy. And then he turned to Aliyev and he said, so how long have you been in leadership? And Aliyev said, 22 years as president of Azerbaijan. He says, see that? President Trump says, see that? 22 years. He's got to be doing something right. Obviously, he's a good leader or he wouldn't have been there for 22 years. No, actually, listen, Ilham Aliyev took over the presidency from his father. His father rigged a fake election and got his son elected as the president. Aliyev has since consolidated power around himself and is essentially president for life. The human rights abuses that Azerbaijan has engaged in over the last 30 or 40 years could fill 100 documentaries. Then Ilham Aliyev appointed his wife as the vice president. He has jailed all sorts of journalists inside Azerbaijan. As I mentioned before, he's got 80 or so Armenian hostages that they've been holding for years in there. And there's been reports of tortures and all sorts of stuff. The Freedom Index ranking of Azerbaijan is lower than that of Iran. So that should tell you pretty much all you need to know about Azerbaijan and about whether or not Nikol Pashinyan would want to be friends with somebody like Ilham Aliyev. He doesn't want to be friends with him. And now they shook hands and they bit their tongues. And the saddest part of this whole press conference came right at the end. One journalist stood up and said, Mr. President, what about the hostages that Azerbaijan is holding? And will there be any right of return for the Armenians who were driven out of their homes in 2023? Boom, like actually ask the question that all of the journalists should have been asking. And President Trump was like, yeah, skip right over that. Next question. And they just ignored it. Just 100% ignored it. Nikol Pashinyan ignored it, did not speak up and say, hey, no, this is an issue. We need to know about this because we got 150,000 people in our country that are refugees because you pushed them out of their homes. But if he had talked like that to Ilhan Aliyev, they probably wouldn't have got the deal signed. And so Pashinyan bit his tongue, kept his mouth shut, and they signed this agreement. But it is not a peace deal. And I want you to tell your friends, I want you to help people understand it is not a peace deal. Okay. Now, a lot of people wonder, why should we support Armenia over Azerbaijan anyway? Armenia doesn't have anything to offer the United States. They don't have any natural resources that we need or anything like that. So why would we support Armenia? And again, as I always say, you should start in making a decision like that on which side to support in a conflict around the world by looking at it in moral terms. And in moral terms, the Armenians didn't attack Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan attacked Armenia. And Armenia lost, but they were still the ones that were being aggressed against. So for that reason, I would support Armenia alone, because it's wrong to attack your neighbors, period. End of story. So that's step one. Step two is the fact that Armenia is the world's first Christian nation. And I think Christians in America should stand up for Armenia, because a lot of people here in Armenia are our brothers and sisters in Christ. And there was a delegation that came to Armenia last week, and I went down and spent a day with them, going around and meeting with the French ambassador and the minister of security and the minister of foreign affairs, a whole bunch of people that we met with. And in those meetings, the delegates from the United States got a much better understanding about why Armenia matters. And so I want to play for you just a couple of quotes out of that. Take a listen.
But even since then, the Soviet Union has pretty much defended these people. Now they've backed off from them because they're showing inclinations to move to the West. And so they're really an orphan out here waiting for somebody to pick them up, and America should be the one doing that.
I think this is America First region. This is the first Christian nation in the world. This is the only nation that's the light in this region. It's surrounded by Turkey. It's surrounded by Azerbaijan, which is aggressing upon them all the time and threatens to do so almost every day. And then they have Iran right below it. So this is a strategic America First space for America to be involved.
We've got brothers and sisters over here we need to be defending. We've got free countries over here that love America we need to be defending. But we've also got a historical connection to this country that needs to be known by all Americans.
That woman that was speaking was Suzanne Grishman. She's the head of Mercury One Group, Glenn Beck's thing. And the man that was speaking was David Barton, who's an American history author. He's taught college courses, and he founded the organization known as Wall Builders. So they're just two of the probably 15 or 20 delegates that came on this trip to Armenia. And you can hear how they really got a sense for the fact that Armenians deserve our support and we should stand up for Armenia. Israel should stand up for Armenia, but they don't. They actually are friends with Azerbaijan, and that rubs a lot of people the wrong way here in Armenia. And I don't blame them. It is very unfortunate that Israel chose not to make its decisions on who to ally with based on morality, but based on expediency. And in so doing, became a trading partner with Azerbaijan, traded them weapons for oil, and those weapons were used against Armenians here during the war by Azerbaijan. And so that's just the tangled web that is woven by all these countries in this region.